Hey all. For about 4.5 years when I was a young man, I lived in New York City, in Brooklyn actually. I remember hearing it before I moved to New York, and then realizing it to be true, that after a while, few things in New York really shock you. You can only see a person urinate on a train so many times, or people talking to themselves, or smoking crack, or shooting heroin out in public, or even a walk by a celebrity before you're kind of desensitized. New York is sort of where weird happens and weird becomes normal. A few years after I moved out, my wife and I took a day trip down to the Brooklyn Museum. It was a Saturday afternoon in November 2011, and as we walked out, I remember seeing this man right here holding this sign that said, "Pissing on the Talmud is freedom of speech." Now, because this is YouTube and because of the history of anti-Jewish sentiment, I want to make clear I am not Jewish. I grew up in a town with many secular Jewish people, and then I lived in Boston and then New York City around many Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox and also secular Jews. And this video has really nothing to do with the Jewish religion. So, just to be clear, this video has nothing to do with Judaism. It's about speech. Oh, and one other thing. In case you're not familiar with what the Talmud is, the Talmud, as I understand it, is not a series of holy books, but a series of commentaries on the scriptures and on Jewish thought. Now, here's what I remember of this photograph. As I said, when we walked out, this man was holding the sign, and these two people had approached him, and they were arguing with him about it. And the gist was something like this. How dare he, in the middle of Brooklyn, place with hundreds of thousands of Jewish people, hold this sign up that could be so offensive to Jewish people? Now, one interesting thing that I think about is that Orthodox Jews are not known to be out on the street on a Saturday afternoon, and they're the ones that would probably be the most offended by this. But still, I think I understand what they were taking offense about. And as I recall, the man identified himself as a secular Jew, and they identified themselves as secular Jews also. And so, I don't know that this woman or her friend over here were really religiously insulted by this man, but what I think they took offense at was that he was potentially offending other people. The conversation didn't get too heated. I mean, this was 2011, not 2022. But I'd imagine, being Jewish, you probably think a lot about what happens when people turn on you, when people insult your religion, when you're seen as another group of people. And so, I suppose I get it. I think this man was just doing it to be provocative. Perhaps he was an artist himself. I mean, after all, a little over a decade earlier, the Brooklyn Museum had been a site of controversy over a religiously offensive piece of artwork. In 1999, then Mayor Rudolph Giuliani threatened to shut down this exhibit because it had included a painting of the Blessed Virgin Mary that had been done in elephant dung. Now, New York City is probably not the first place you think of when you think of religious piety, but for years, New York City was one of the largest and most active places for Roman Catholics. And even Rudy Giuliani, himself a twice divorced, maybe now 3 times divorced, lapsed Catholic, he understood the political ramifications for this painting being there. Ultimately, I'm not sure what happened to the painting. Like so many things in the late 90s, it was just shock value. And what shocked people in the 90s would be considered pretty tame today. But I mentioned earlier, this video of these photographs, it's actually about speech, not about religion. I do have my religious beliefs. I am Catholic myself, but I also believe in something in a liberal democracy that is very important, and that is freedom of speech. I believe in it so much that I'm not sure that we should really have limitations to anything that doesn't actually physically harm someone. And maybe that libertine attitude is offensive to God, but I also think that it protects people, whether they don't believe or they do believe, because it can constrain the government against repressing your views, your opinions, your disbelief, or your belief. In my view, the two most important amendments are the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, which protects the first. We have a right to be offensive, and we also have a duty to be offended. Now, could I find offense in images of the Blessed Virgin Mary or Jesus Christ? Most definitely. And they are out there. There are plenty of anti-Catholic and just anti-Christian pieces of art out there. I think the key is you just don't consume the things that you're not interested in. That's part of the bargain. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I'm not an expert on the First Amendment. And there's much debate to be had, particularly when it comes to things that offend people. And if you're my age or older, you've probably noticed that people seem to be more offended more easily lately, even so than they were in, say, 2011. And I have reasons why I think that is, but I'm not going to get into them. I only want to say that I think that part of living in the United States, or the West, for that matter, in 2022, is the willingness to be offended and the risk of offending other people, and accepting both of those things together. It's a give and a take that allows us to be citizens, that allows us to correct our course, to explore new ideas. And it doesn't come without pain, of course. The things that we care about, our ideas, our beliefs, our unbelief, can be challenged and offended. Who we are, who we see ourselves to be, who we identify as, that can be a source of controversy. And all of us, I don't care how tough somebody says they are, have been offended at something in their life. And our urge, is usually to say, I wish I could just clobber that person. But would you want to live in a world where you could just clobber somebody for saying something or portraying something that is offensive to you? Now, speaking as a person who's somewhat religious, I certainly think there are limitations to what somebody can do. You cannot desecrate somebody's house of worship. Burning temples and ashrams and mosques and churches is never acceptable. Disturbing worship is wrong. Intimidating people for their faith or disbelief is wrong. I certainly don't think that Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox people should just put up with people desecrating their sacraments. Not at all. But there has to be some wiggle room to be offended. And speaking from the perspective of somebody who goes to church, I realize that my religion is offensive to many people. That's the world that I live in. And that's okay, because there's other things in this world that offend me or make me mad. But I think the important part is that we don't try to clobber those people that we disagree with. We don't try to cancel them or make them othered. It really is a part of the bargain. And I've seen a lot of protests in my life. And I think that they're interesting to watch. And it's interesting to see people engage in debate, even if it's mostly fruitless. Because so many parts of the world, that's not something that exists. Even our own allies, some of our own allies, the First Amendment is a foreign concept to them. And so as I look back at this man and his offensive, poorly made cardboard sign right there, I get it. These people were bothered by it. But I think it was important that they just addressed it to him, that they didn't want him to be silenced or stopped or beaten up or anything like that. I think they still had that understanding that, yes, you can be offended, but you can also walk away from it. So thank you for letting me share this photo with you. I will put in the descriptions some information on the Brooklyn Museum and Wikipedia information about the Talmud. Thank you very much. Happy New Year. Happy 2022 to you. I hope that you have a blessed year. God bless you.